Hi, and welcome back to Naramic 2. Let's talk Minecraft. I'm pretty heavy on the Minecraft theming across my channels, but I mean this channel certainly isn't focused on the game, and neither are the other two, so surely I must just like the game, right? In reality it's just because I'm lazy, but it's a good springboard into today's topic. Do I like Minecraft? I've been playing since version 1.2, and I've had more than enough time to think about whether I actually like the game or not. And if you want the short answer, yes. But with the exception that there's always a but after that. And, well, yes, the game I bought back in 2012 is technically still within, at its core, every single version of the game that's come out since. Equally, I have to acknowledge that there's been additions made which I don't exactly gel with all too much. So that's my rationale for why I say yes, and I like to think it's simple enough. At its core, the game is still what I liked a decade ago, and I can choose to play however I want. If I don't want to engage with the newer features, 9 times out of 10 I'm not made to in the newer versions, and there's always the option to go and play the older versions themselves in the launcher. But why would I not want to engage with some of the newer additions? Well, from my own perspective, I never had a knee-jerk reaction to what an update brought to the game until 2016. At worst, the 1.6 horse update seemed a little lacking, but you can forgive that when it's sandwiched in between 2 other updates that dropped within the same year. I might be beating a dead horse here, but the first time anything seemed off to me was the 1.9 update. Surprisingly, the combat wasn't what I took issue with. I was mainly playing on the laptop trackpad at the time, so not having to spam click to win a fight was a welcome change. Mending might be controversial, but I think it frees up time to do more engaging things like mining. The expansion to the end wasn't all too bad either, as was the changed End Dragon fight. Elytras at their inception weren't all too bad either, being a glider with situational enough uses, but ultimately still a novelty. Now, nothing in this update is outright bad, I'd say. However, what I think gave me and other people some immediate unease in its release is how it felt different to the updates that preceded it. It changed a whole boss fight and expanded a dimension. While those changes were arguably quite good, I think it upset some sort of careful balance. I'm nostalgic for the old end, but I know the new one is better. It just felt weird to see the old island go, even if it was still there in a way. It was, in my opinion, a first step to a different direction for updates, and while I don't think 1.9 is bad, I think the vibe around it is less about the update content itself, and more so what it signalled could have and did follow it. Now granted, 1.10 didn't add anything I think people would take issue with, but I also didn't really get excited by the few things it did add. There's a whole conversation to be had about new passive mobs and where their place in the game is, and you can argue here that with polar bears being included. But at the end of the day, that's about it. 1.11 though? Shulker boxes are admittedly welcome solutions to portable storage that are scarce enough to justify the benefit they give you. Llamas were also added this update, and I'll come back to them a little later, so just leave a pin in that. So Woodland Mansions, they were added also in 1.11, and you know, they're pretty cool. I like their decor, they're quite rare, and I like most of the new mobs. They all look pretty stylistically cohesive to what we've got in the game so far. All's well and good. And honestly, if this segment ended here, I'd say 1.11 was fine, but I've pulled out the face cam, so you know that probably isn't the case. This is the Evoker, and it's arguably the rarest mob that spawns in Woodland Mansions and also the most dangerous. See, it has 2 attacks, and I'm just going to stick them both on screen now. That one, it summons another mob called Vexes that will try and fly towards you and attack you. They're a bit annoying to deal with because they've got quite the small hitbox, but honestly I don't mind it as an attack. You know, it's something we haven't seen before, but it still feels Minecrafty enough, which I think is, you know, a passing grade. But it has something else. It has this like shockwave attack, where it sends like kind of pillars, spikes out the floor to hit you. You've got to run and jump out of the way. But the animation for it has always irked me, because I think this is the first point, at least in my experience with the game, where I looked at it and I went, that feels like it's from a mod more than the base game. It just didn't feel stylistically consistent, which is the look of Minecraft and whatnot. You've got a very specific expectation to stick to. So when I see these things coming out the ground, they've got animation cycles and stuff. Previously stuff you'd only really see with like the Ender Dragon, and even that was quite limited. It just feels a bit weird. It doesn't feel in line with everything else, because when you kill it, for as powerful as it is, it drops something equally as powerful, you know? It's rare, it spawns in a rare building, and one specific biome no less, and then it's the rarest thing inside that building, and also arguably the most powerful. It drops a totem of undying, which, as the name may imply, stops you from dying once. You hold it, it breaks, and it gives you a cocktail full of potion effects and an immediate injection of hearts to make sure you don't die. Now in survival, I don't actually mind this, because I mean, you know, it just means you don't have to go back and collect your stuff at the end of the day, or, oh, it saves your stuff burning once. Fine. But I take issue with that in hardcore, because to me it kind of nullifies the impact of the mode. Like, when I think of hardcore mode, I always think of that one time Philza died, because it was on news round for some reason. But you know, like, that was impactful because he died. The series came to an end, and you know, it was sudden, but there was no way he could have gotten out of it. But with Totems of Undying, that kind of changes in a way, because you kind of could. Like, if that was filmed on a modern version of the game, his offhand would have probably had a totem in it, it would have popped, he could have got out, and he could have kept on going on his merry way. Which, to me, would have nullified the difficulty of hardcore, because at that moment, he did objectively die, but hardcore went from, you die once, the world is gone, to now, we are giving you an intended mechanic to where, yes, you did die, but you only fail if you die when you're not holding this specific item, which I think to add that sort of caveat just feels cheap in my opinion, especially in hardcore worlds. Survival, don't care. Hardcore, I think, you know, just make them not drop it or drop something equally as valuable that just doesn't nullify the meaning of the mode would go a long way in my eyes. But I do have to give credit where it's due. It is a risk-reward thing trying to acquire them, and they're rare for the time being. So for as much as I have an issue with this update, I also can't take too much issue with it, because it's at least balanced, and at worst, at least it's out of the way and I don't need to see it often. For now. And then there's the Elytra, which also got changed this update. Yeah, so I initially didn't mind the Elytra's initial inclusion. I think gliding's kind of a nice enough novelty on its own, you know, it can fit within the game just fine, and I think swapping it out for your chest plate and whatnot, while a little bit weird, it's, you know, it is how it is. People complained, at least I imagine that's why this got changed, that the Elytra was underpowered. You know, you put all this effort into defeating the Ender Dragon, something that was like notoriously easy even in 1.11 and has only gotten easier since. And, you know, the people wanted recompense, if that's even a word. They wanted this thing that they put their hard-earned time into to work exceedingly efficiently. And, well, they got their wish. As of 1.11, the Elytra gained the ability to take off if you right-clicked a firework rocket and had it equipped in your hand. Which is, it's something. But in doing this, just allowing that single action to take off anywhere or just gain additional height if you were already in the air, killed horses, boats, and rails as a form of transportation, leaving the only one even remotely viable to be boats. Now, let me explain. In the time it would take you to go get the iron and the gold for a railway network and whatnot, you could defeat the Ender Dragon, probably find an Elytra, even slap mending on it, and maybe even build a creeper farm to start farming gunpowder. And to a point, I think, you know, yeah, rails probably did need a quicker way to go being built, because it takes effing forever. But at the same time, I don't think the solution to that and making travel that faster, you know, that instantaneous ability to get from one point to the other, was to give an item such an overpowered ability, it erased the purpose to use rails at all, unless it was in a farm or for a roller coaster. I think as a transport method, they were fine. Maybe needed a little bit of a buff. I mean, the same with horses, you know, I like that, having the stable and whatnot, they're good. But now it's like, why would you go out and find a horse with good stats? Or, you know, go and find horse armor to make your choice that stays alive? Or, you know, find gold for powered rails, when you can just go find an Elytra, get some firework rockets, and do the same travel distance quicker whilst going over all your obstacles. I like the initial implementation, but taking off everywhere was the wrong way to go about buffing the item, because it's just too overpowered. And I'm really surprised it hasn't seen a tweak, but also at the same point, I'm not surprised at all. I think it could have used tweaks, but now we're this far into this iteration of the item, I don't think we're going to see it, because could you imagine the backlash from everyone that relies on this item, sheerly because of how effing useful it is, complaining that, oh, it's done this and they want to make rails more thing, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's going to be complaints unless other stuff is changed, and I think that's just too big of an undertaking Mojang are willing to make. Like, I think it's just going to be kept the same, and that kind of bums me out, because it does just nullify all of the forms of travel by making such a no-brainer option. There's no reason to use them at all for their intended purpose. At least 1.12 went pretty fine. It was criticised at the time for being lacking in features like 1.10, but in terms of being a version of the game, I'd argue it's pretty damn good, just now with some ignorable caveats that I can take issue with, but ultimately don't need to engage with myself. Treasure this peaceful moment, and believe me, we're going to be taking a short detour and talking about game development. You see, I'm not the only person to have said that certain additions to Minecraft don't feel like they fit within Minecraft, or feel like something you'd see in a mod. And I've seen people chalk that up to being resistant to change or biased by nostalgia towards other versions. And while that could be a factor, I also want to give that claim a tiny bit of backing because it isn't as simple to refute as saying, no, you're wrong. Ultimately, it's a matter of preference, and it's been a debate within the Minecraft community long before 1.9 came around. There are still people out there who play the alpha and beta versions of Minecraft, because they found that version of the game to appeal best to them, having taken issue with later inclusions such as Blind the World Generation and the Hunger System to name a few. It doesn't take long to look and find people who play those versions, in the same way you still find people playing 1.8 who don't like the combat update that came immediately afterwards. They're entitled to do that if they so wish, with each camp fostering a community within a version or so before a major change to the game was made. Minecraft was starting to become a much bigger game towards the end of beta, and by the time 1.8 rolled around it was arguably the biggest game in the world. And that, combined with community backlash when trying to clamp down on pay-to-win servers at the time, ultimately led to Notch to sell Minecraft to Microsoft and leave the company. If you want to split the game's history into 3 eras based on development at the time, I think the very early days where it was mostly just Notch developing the game could be called the Notch era. Once the team started expanding into 2011 we can call that the Mojang era, and once Notch left we'll call that the Microsoft era. Now I could be off base with this, but both examples of splits in the community I made earlier coincide roughly to each of those eras. 1.8 released a few short months before the game was bought by Microsoft, and Beta 1.7 6 months or so into the Mojang era, right before creative direction was handed over to Jeb from Notch. As you bring more people into development, there's always going to be a chance for iterative correction to shift, especially when the people at the top get shuffled around. And hell, even with the same group of people, they change over time, so that may even end up impacting what does and doesn't make the cutting room floor. Again, after Minecraft 1.0's release, Notch took a backseat and handed main creative control over to Jeb going forward. Now to some people, Minecraft was Notch, in a way. They liked the ideas that a single person brought and programmed to the table, and their vision aligned very strongly with his vision for the game. So that when creative control shifted, that guarantee was less so there. Jeb might have added something that skewed away from that path, and that might have been ultimately what pushed them away. There's nothing wrong by almost entirely agreeing with one person's vision for a game, but it means that when eventually control's handed over to someone else, there's no guarantee that the newer additions which are made are going to appease the people who were so directly aligned with the original creator's vision. For example, for every person who thinks the Evoker's ranged animation is cool and good-looking animation, there will equally be people who look at it and say that that falls outside what they expect the scope of the game to be. And then double that when they're bought by Microsoft. I can't tell you specifics, but I can speculate certain features, such as you, and you, weren't decided by the people working at Mojang. And on the topic of those people working at Mojang, by the time they'd been bought, it was half a decade since the development team had initially been set up. There's going to be some change in the staffing, and hell, the people that might have stayed on may have just changed themselves. All of that impacts creative direction. Some people will be on board for it, others maybe less so. But come 2018, I think a conscious effort was made to change the direction of the game, given it had somewhat fallen off in recent times. Because 1.13 feels so different from what you'd expect in a Minecraft update, that it feels almost as fresh as the fish you can catch in this update. Now to start this update off, I touched on this earlier, but Minecraft is largely an additive game, and at best things will get reworked. Nothing's ever going to be outright removed, unless you only see it in a pre-release version. However, if there were to ever be a case to remove something that managed to make it into a final version of an update, these fuckers would be a frontrunner.
Number 3, I don't like you.
Barring that, I actually like this update. Bubble columns are effing great. I like the new swimming, the coral reefs and aquatic life all look really damn good, and the trident has a level of usability I only wish the elytra came with. Situational, but you can work to make that situationalness a little bit more convenient for your sake. And 1.14 keeps the streak going. Initially I wasn't a huge fan to the village changes, but it's clearly an objective improvement. The newer furnace and crafting blocks add some delicious quality of life, even if I do forget to ever use them most days, and I like all the mobs that were added. But unfortunately, the worst thing about this update, which means I can't rate it as highly as 1.13, is the result of something that was added 3 updates earlier. And also the introduction of Bedrock Edition for every single player on console, but that's a discussion for another day if this video does well. Overall, I also think 1.14 is a good update. I think all the blocks and utility stuff that was added in this update is pretty good, and the village changes are definitely a highlight, even though it took a while for me to warm to them. But there's another change to do with villages that unfortunately has forever stained this update, and again is not something I think we'll see changed. See, I want to cast your mind back to 3 updates ago when we were talking about 1.11. Where, you know, the Elytra got a buff from a few updates ago, and now, in the same manner, Tomes of Undying are about to get the biggest buff in their history, indirectly. Because this update introduced village raids. If you were to go to an illager outpost and kill a certain type of guy that spawns there semi-consistently, or into a raiding party that can spawn randomly in the wild and kill that guy as well, you get Bad Omen. If you go to a village with Bad Omen active, it activates a raid. And the same guys from 1.11 that you find in the mansions come and attack the village, kill people, you need to kill them. Yeah, it's a challenge, maybe something you want to try and avoid with a few buckets of milk. It is how it is. There's a few new mobs as well, though I don't really have much to say on them, other than this elephant-looking guy looks really effing goofy, but you know, that's neither here nor there. The main issue is that within these raiding parties, evokers spawn, and as expected, they drop Totems of Undying. So previously I said that at least they're semi-balanced, because they're rare, but with the inclusion of pillager outposts, you know, raid parties, and, well, the ability to kind of start raids on command, they went from a risk-reward type of thing, where at the very least trying to get one risked you losing another totem or even losing your life outright. With the battle being on your terms this update, you know, you're not in a mansion anymore with like restricted corridors or whatnot. You don't need to adapt like that. You can just prepare a village beforehand to basically just kill the raid for you. And it's really not that complex. Like, you could do something as simple as just making a cobblestone wall and a pit around the entire thing, and like, you know, like within like 30 minutes, I'd argue, you can cheese any raid that comes to the village by just some, you know, clever positioning of blocks, and I use clever very loosely there. So obviously, that makes raids fall into what I like to call the age-old rule of Minecraft, next only to don't dig straight down. See, if anything can be farmed in Minecraft, someone will probably find a way to do it, and oh god did they. To cut a long story short, this update basically made farming for Totems of Undying piss easy, and it basically took the one caveat to, okay, I like the rarity and difficulty of this item to obtain, to just go out the window. You can basically get them on command at this point, and I don't like that. It just doubles down on my bad feelings about the item to where there's no real upside. I feel as though it just further, you know, allows people to cheese hardcore and take away from that initial kind of high-stakes feel of it. It's like, cutting back to the filter example I gave before, imagine now, instead of just having, you know, 4 Totems Undying from the one thing he'd found so far, imagine now he's got a farm, and he goes back to it, and just half his inventory is Totems of Undying. So even if he fell into the void, he could probably, at this point in time, pop a Totem of Undying and use his Elytra to fly back, you know, out of the void. Like, that's the stage we're getting to here now in just sheer absurdity. So, you know, dying is just... The void isn't even a threat anymore, man. Speaking of things that kill you, that wraps up all I have to say on 1.14, so we're going to be jumping straight into 1.16, because 1.15 really doesn't have too much to discuss. Now 1.16 hugely revamped the Nether, arguably in a more extensive way than we saw the End getting the same treatment back in 1.9. It adds a range of new mobs, biomes, blocks, structures, and most importantly of all, netherite. Now, I like netherite. Is it an absolute pain in the ass to try and find? Yes! Is it cool and worth the time I put into acquiring it? Absolutely! As for the new biomes, also pretty good. New wood types are always welcome, and I appreciate the addition of piglins and that one skeleton biome to make the place feel more proactively dangerous than it had previously. Realistically, unless it was an accidental pigman hit or a surprise ghast, you weren't in danger unless you were inside a fortress. They also added hoglins. I do not like hoglins, they scare me and look funny. I think as an update that ultimately changed the traditional Minecraft formula, going out of its way to make a higher tier of tools and armor available, while simultaneously making getting to the Ender Dragon a tiny bit more difficult, I think it does it well as anyone could have asked. When I think about every single thing that's been added this update, I can't give it anything lower than higher marks. If there truly was a change in direction to try and boost the game's popularity from 1.13 onwards, these three major updates, and 1.15 had succeeded in my eyes. The game had pulled itself out of a lull in interest and was once again a frontrunner for when it came to online content. If the trade-off is one major balance issue and two mobs I think look funny for all these good updates that have been brought to the game, then I will happily take that trade. Now, 1.17 brought back the concept of splitting an update in half, something we haven't seen since the game was about to leave beta with the Adventure update. 1.17 and 1.18 together form the Caves and Cliffs update and the definition of Mojang's naming scheme for them. So reasonably you'd expect some sort of delivery on that promise in each half of the update. Like the cave revamp in one update and the mountain half of the update in the next. Well, no. Almost all of the world generation elements are actually found in 1.18. Caves and Cliffs Part 1 introduces the infamous glow squid, copper ore, goats, candles, lightning rods, axolotls, and some blocks intended for use in the following update's generation. Additionally, axolotls were also added. I like them and think they're a nice match for the aquatic life added in 1.13, but if you're looking for them, while they could spawn in the cave generation at the time, but I think the case with them and all the other generation related blocks in this update is that they're all there, but just in technicality. I don't think I'm out of line for saying that Caves and Cliffs as an update was only completed at 1.18. All the stuff in 1.17 didn't really deliver on the promise of the update, other than saying, look at all this cool stuff you can't use in its intended way, because the remaining portion of the update hasn't been developed yet. It just doesn't sit right with me, and I don't think it sat equally right for a lot of the community either. I can see the reasoning to have split this update in two because of COVID and to give a little bump in interest in the game and whatnot, but I don't think they needed that bump in interest because they still have stacks upon stacks of cash, and honestly I think I would have been happier if they had just delayed the update until it was one larger update, because as it stands right now, 1.18 is a very good update, but I'm not going to have much of a cause to play 1.17 when I'm basically playing a pre-release version of the update that came immediately after. Now for the additions that didn't depend on the second half of the update to be realised, candles are like, fine. They feel a little bit too detailed for my liking, but at the very least I can see them being used in some cool castle builds. Now on the other side of the coin is copper, the first new overworld ore added since emeralds in 1.3. I don't like it. It serves to construct the lightning rod item and the spyglass. Barring its block variants, that is its only use. I don't understand why it was added exactly. The lightning rod feels too oddly specific to justify. I don't think anyone was exactly screaming out for a solution for lightning striking their house that was coincidentally made of wood on the roof, but you know, maybe I'm just in the wrong circles. The skyglass I can half get, for console players who don't have access to Optifine to get those sweet zooms, but when you're adding a whole new ore in the game, you'd expect it to be justified in its inclusion from the outset, and not feel as though it's playing catch-up in all future updates. Now, do you remember when we spoke about llamas earlier and I said to put a pin in the topic? Well, with the glow squid and goats being added in this update, I feel as though I can finally have this conversation with enough cause to justify. Does it ever feel like there's been mobs added into the game just for the sake of it, or is that just me? Glow squids exist to look nice and drop an item that makes signs glow, and goats ram things. This could be another disconnect in what me and developers both think is best for the game, but I can happily live without seeing llamas, goats, glow squids, or any other mob you might categorize as that, and I'd be just fine. There is a lot of effort that goes into making those guys, I'm sure, but there's only so many times I can look at an animal where its main use is to look nice before I start thinking about what else we could have had if that development time was allocated elsewhere. I don't think these inclusions take away from the experience, but I do think they take away from development of features that might add a little bit more to the game instead. So, leaving 1.17, 1.18 gives us the promised new mountain and cave generation, and despite my gripes with 1.17's handling and at times pointless features, this update is just unabashedly good. Lowering the bedrock level to -64 to give more room for a huge cave was a really good call, and all the new generation is also just bang on. I can't really fault this update because everything I don't like is just kind of handed off to the first half of the update. Oh, sorry. First third. 1.19 added in another new underground biome, the Deep Dark, along with a new unique structure that can spawn within it, the Ancient Cities. This was originally planned for the Caves and Cliffs update, but because they didn't have enough time to fit this into 1.18, they then went and put it into 1.19. This is like my video schedule for this channel levels bad of planning. That aside, everything to do with this inclusion is hella spooky and also pretty damn good. The new Warden boss that encourages sneaking around the skulk-infested areas in the world is scary as he is to defeat. It's all good in this department, but I do want to ask why this just wasn't part of Caves and Cliffs. Because to me it is. If it was a few years down the line we got this, I'd say it was just a natural evolution they hadn't thought of at the time. But this is the next immediate update afterwards. Beyond the Deep Dark, we also got the mangrove swamp biome and the frogs that can spawn in it. Now frogs half fall into that category I was talking about earlier. However, with the unique construction of how this biome works, I think having them spawn in here to at least give this biome some sort of life is nice and ultimately half justifies their existence. I kind of lump them in with parrots in jungle biomes for the same reason. Additionally, the new boats with chests, mangrove wood, and compass that points to where you last died are all nice improvements, with the only thing in this update falling short for me being the alley. It seemed like a useful mob during the mob vote, but from my own research and experience, it has very limited use cases. And then, we finally hit the modern day with 1.20. I like the cherry biome and the wood type they added, armor trims are neat, and hanging signs are something I'm surprised we haven't had for longer. I appreciate the new stuff you can craft with bamboo, and I like the idea behind the upgradable version of the skulk sensor. But the archaeology system they tried to bring in this update wasn't it, with pottery sniffers and camels all feeling lackluster to me for reasons I've already given out to other features earlier. And to a point, I think the fact I can say that allows me to circle round and define the issues I personally take with some of the modern inclusions of the game, without even needing to dive into these features much. And I think the first one should come as a surprise to no one, but it's the fact that things can never seem to go backwards even when it would make sense. Phantoms should have been reworked or disabled. I don't really know a single person who likes their inclusion beyond what they drop repairing elytras. Likewise, I don't think we'll see a removal of the chat reporting system or minecoin store in the Bedrock editions of the game, despite the fact the community has voiced their approval for both features. Secondly, I think the game balance may slightly need to be addressed more. Elytra's totems of undying and to a point mending are too useful in a way that I don't think is helpful for the game, especially with the ease that all three can be acquired. The heart was in the right place with the recent Netherite change, which required you to visit a bastion to get an additional item used to upgrade them. It justified that structure's existence a little bit more, and equally made Netherite a tiny bit harder to get. It wasn't just limited by how many beds you could craft to go mining for it, it was equally defined by how many bastions you were willing to go looting to get the upgrade things, or how many diamonds you had for the crafting recipe that would then duplicate them. I think tweaks like that are healthy for the game because as it stands right now, you don't have to do a lot to be the best, and that personally cheapens the overall survival experience to me. Third, whilst updates have gotten better conceptual-wise since 1.13, I feel as though some focus could be redirected to more important areas to make them have more of a punch behind them. I have seen a lot of criticism for 1.20 essentially just giving us a biome and a few blocks in terms of meaningful contributions, and to an end I agree. I don't think archaeology or copper are examples of systems that could justify their inclusion from the outset, and I don't think it's fair to take away from future update features to instead focus on making those underdeveloped systems justify their existence a little bit more. It just takes away development resources where they could instead be poured into newer ideas that would be a bit more exciting. And equally, I think the same line of logic could be applied for certain animals and mobs, though to some that could equally be a matter of preference. And last is the Performance on Java edition. From 1.13 it's seemingly been just on a downward trend from being able to run on lower end machines. There is a reason Sodium and Optifine still frequently top the most used mods list, and if it's not for shaders it will be because of the performance benefit they give. I understand Bedrock is coded in a different language and may be seen as more of a priority given it contains, you know, money, but even still I think something needs to be done with Java's code. Even if that means cutting back on a few updates to allocate your resources, your players on a budget will thank you. So where's the kicker here? Because I went into this video thinking that I'd script it in such a way where I'd get to the end of the segment and I'd say, so yeah, since 1.9 I feel as though the updates have been going like this with a few peaks, and generally that the game is less consistent in strength overall, yada yada yada, creative direction not left, end video. But that doesn't seem to feel as the case. I still stand by that, yes, the game definitely has issues that need addressing, and it, has flaws. But equally, after having systematically gone through all the updates in my head I thought were issues, I realised either A, I didn't really dislike the update all that much, or B, the issues I did have were just a lot less in number than, I thought I had. So it's kind of confusing because this is where the original conclusion would have been. But I don't have a conclusion, I just can walk away saying, yeah, turns out I thought I hated the game just a tiny bit, but still had a long-standing appreciation for it. Whereas now it's, okay, yeah, the game has flaws, but I still like it. So instead of having the conclusion here, let's go into overtime. So why did I not like the game? Or at least, should I rephrase that and say, if I thought I didn't like the game, if it wasn't the updates that had made me not like the game in its entirety, then what else was at play? No matter how much Twitter or YouTube may try to tell you otherwise, Minecraft has its issues, but it isn't anywhere as bad or going anywhere anytime soon. And I failed to mention multiplayer much in depth now too, but I want to give it its due praise also. I think the inclusion of that mode, and what people are able to achieve with plugins and command blocks is super impressive, and to see those accomplishments bringing people together in their thousands is really cool. A lot of the content that people look fondly back on was built upon the presence of just having that mode available at all. And while I understand it isn't exactly a groundbreaking feature for Minecraft to have included, I do think that multiplayer allowed Minecraft to foster a community much greater than it ever could have as solely a single player game. Even at its most basic, a vanilla server with a few friends is some of the most fun I'd argue you can have online. Even when I was super jaded on the game, hopping into a realm with my friends was just like, it gives you this sense of magic I can't exactly describe in words that just manages to hook you with this infectious fever to keep going back and play more. A lot of games and websites have the ability to connect people from all across the globe, but I think the ability in Minecraft to make a world that you can really come to call your own is practically unrivaled. To me, the fact alone that no matter my current stance on the game's updates, that I can boot up a world and still have unparalleled fun making memories with my friends is why I think the game deserves to be the best-selling game of all time, despite where it has shortcomings. So what has been swaying my opinion then, or at least making it worse than it should reasonably be? It's the other side of the coin when it comes to the community, specifically when it comes to online discussions and content creation. When you're surrounded by negativity, it's easy to fall into the same mindset and ultimately end up repeating the cycle. Plus, it's a lot easier to agree with negativity or stay silent than it is to challenge it with a positive view. As for the second half, it's a little bit more of a systemic issue with YouTube as a whole, but doesn't it feel as though Minecraft these last few years has gotten increasingly watered down on the site? There are good people out there making original ideas with unique personalities, but as of late there's just a sea of Mr. Beastified, trying to be other people and playing at abhorrently safe creators. 100 Days was a novel concept when Luke the Notable did it the first time, as was building something stupidly complex in Minecraft Hardcore. But does that same idea remain as fresh and interesting when you see a sea of people doing the same thing, following the initial trend without much to change it up? You hear the same songs from the Wii as background music because that's what worked for someone else before. You don't get a second to breathe because their competitors edit the videos at the same pace, so going any slower might mean you might leave. They can't show too much personality because you might not gel with them if you get to know too much about them, and they need to equally be squeaky clean and seemingly always speak in a higher pitched tone of voice to make sure they don't alienate the toddlers who might be watching too. Conceptually, those videos are good, and I'm sure they're all equally well edited, titled, and thumbnailed, but they don't stand out from one another in my head. Behind all the boxes they tick, they miss the one where I remember the video afterwards. This whole section isn't meant to be a jab at any one creator I've seen in particular, I just genuinely cannot remember or differentiate the videos I'm meant to be slating here, but I do remember the mounting feeling of, this is safe, of course this is high energy. Are they being as basic as possible on purpose? Recently, Game Theory posted a video on how the rise in short form video has meant that people don't remember creators on YouTube Shorts or TikTok, but they do remember specific videos instead. Those platforms, TikTok especially, don't lend themselves to being about creators a lot of the time. Whilst some will gain notoriety as themselves, a lot of people don't leave that stamp on the site whilst their videos do. And TikTok has been wildly successful since its launch, and I think while the short format of videos is one component of it, I think people took notice of how videos succeed on there and have tried to translate that into YouTube videos. You take that high energy of a 1 minute video and then make it 18. You pull a Mr. Beast and show as little personality as possible to have the biggest possible audience, and you edit like those 5-year-olds will die if there isn't an effect on screen every 10 seconds. And your result is something suitable for a mass market that appeals to none. I kind of see it like this. Imagine there is a market, and there's a bunch of different stalls run by different bakers, and they all sell a wide selection of cakes. Now as time goes on and they hear, about new flavours or things that other people at stalls are doing, or hell, even people at different markets are doing to get higher sales, naturally, they put them in their products. They want to succeed and, make them work. And then it kind of gets to a point where it's like, everyone's happy. The customer's getting more stuff and more bang for their buck, the deal's going down, everything's going well. And it starts to speed up and you find, it gets more and more optimized. Somebody finds something they can add onto their cake to make it sell better, and everybody else copies it. And now, just one person doing it gave them a boost, but now none of them get that boost. But then somebody else does that thing. Then everybody does it. And they can't stop doing those things which aren't really giving them much of a benefit anymore, because those are the things that they've kind of just set the standard for. They're the precedent almost. It's like, I can't make my cake have, one less layer because that's what's keeping me on par with everybody else that's got that extra layer. And it starts to get a little, concerning, because you keep going and going and there's these changes and iterations and they keep getting it down to a practical science to where you go there 1 week and almost every single thing being offered is the same. And you can kind of tell who's selling what, the bakers all still look different. But when you go to them, you don't see their personality, because it's gotten that optimized to the point where they know exactly how to act to almost guarantee the highest chance for themselves to sell you that cake. There's no personality behind them. And while, they don't have to act like that, the fact everybody else is acting at that optimal level means they have to too. And everything there is statistically designed to be enjoyable. It's high quality, this should appeal to you. But eventually, you have enough of it and you realise, I don't like this. Even though it's been designed to be exactly what you want and you bought, it reaches a point where you get sick of it. And you might go and look for something lower quality because it just isn't that. So you leave, you don't come back, go to a different place that sells different stuff, and you can see the person behind the counter there themselves and not this robot that's just trying to sell cakes and purge themselves of all personality. But would you go back to that market a few years down the road when the optimal formula has changed? They're selling still all the same cake, but it's a different flavour of cake, one you might even like. Would you go back and buy some of that, knowing that that still exists under the same ethos of it basically is just a maximum performance to them? Would you go there, or would you keep going to different places that were offering maybe something not as objectively as good, but something with a little bit more soul behind it? You can have a conversation and get to know the person behind the counter, and some of the things they're serving you might be a little bit shit, but equally, they're giving you a newer experience. Not everyone might like it, but you might. Or would you have even noticed? What if the environment had changed so much that before you even had time to think if it was good or bad, you just moved along, your opinions kind of stuttered in forming because somebody comes, they brush you along onto the next thing, yada yada, get you out the door as quick as possible onto the next thing. They don't give you time to think, they don't give you to form an opinion. And then when you do, it's kind of like a phase in your mind. It's like, I remember watching this, and it was high quality, it was well presented and whatnot, but you can't remember how it tasted. But you just remember, it was well produced, it looked nice, and I didn't dislike it either, so therefore I must have liked it somewhat. And it's like, they're basically serving you something that no one dislikes. So it's disliked by almost none, but in a way it's also liked by almost no one either. But the environment that it exists in, and kind of is curated by, the market, it doesn't give you a chance to really properly criticise that, because it just keeps moving. You don't have that moment to reflect and go, did I really like that? You could keep going back because you still liked it technically, so therefore you gotta like it. But what if, despite that, the cake you were being served over time just eventually became really fucking bland? And what if this was all just one very big analogy for the state of Minecraft YouTube?
It's my opinion that online media is getting stale, and I feel that Minecraft has been hit the most by these changes, in part due to its popularity and pre-existing mass appeal.
There's a reason I made a video on a TV show I enjoyed earlier this year, and it wasn't just to try and get the attention of the casting team, but hey, I can dream. Seriously, I enjoyed the trailers as much as I did because it felt fresh, it had something behind it, and it stuck with me after it aired. For a medium people say is destined to fail in response to how good online content is, it was the best and most engaging thing I'd seen this last year. In short, I think Minecraft content has gotten stale as of late, and I think that lack of personality and new innovations in videos will influence people's opinion on the game. I mean, what's easy to think? This video is simply boring because Minecraft is, or this video is boring due to a series of social factors impacting the creation of online content, of which is partial to the concept of death of creators, and a serious over-acceleration of methods better used to grab the viewer's attention whilst increasing the maximum appeal of the video there and resulting in a high guarantee for me to watch such offerings whilst simultaneously not overly enjoying them at all. I mean, the second one practically just rolls off the tongue. And I think this issue is exemplified with Minecraft a lot more, because the game's main blow-up, even back in 2009, it was arguably one of the first games where you saw it getting mainstream success because of the online content being generated around it. And I think when that online content has shown time and time again to cause renewed interest in the game, for that online content to then become dry, stale, and repetitive, I think that impacts the game a lot more than people realise. Because if that content is responsible for boosting the game's popularity, I think it can equally be said that it may decrease the game's popularity through means of being boring. And I would think when all the content becomes samey, it becomes boring, and it's not really expressing anything or doing anything creative to stand out, I think that's going to impact your thoughts on the game. Because you see these videos getting bigger and bigger and bigger in what they do, and I think that again has a passive effect on the player base where it's like, yes, this person has built the biggest thing in Minecraft Hardcore, and now this person has, and all these people have committed to these massive feats. And while I haven't really observed this anywhere else, I think passingly on a player's want to play the game, it's like, okay, yeah, all these people are doing insane stuff 24/7, and none of the content at the top of the ecosystem, from what I've seen, has really promoted that ground level content which you could do yourself. You don't need to invest much time into, you can just play the game and have fun, and I don't think there's much content that has really highlighted that as of late. And I think having that content at the top is important, because it shows that without any sort of random prerequisite to quote-unquote spice the game up to be interesting, it can be fun at a base level. I think it's very important to note that when the game first saw its massive blow-up in success, it was people making that type of content because the online standards hadn't gone that high up. And I think that's quite telling. But when most people attribute the game's second rise in popularity not only to increased quality of updates, but additionally PewDiePie's survival series, that series is just him playing Minecraft, and it's not like the content we've discussed previously. And I think the fact that, of all things, is attributed to shooting Minecraft back into the public consciousness, at least in part, is really telling, because content was already heading down that road back then. So for a series like that to put the game back on the map, or at least give it a boost, and not one of those overproduced videos, I think says a lot, personally. I mean, I've spoke to a few friends about scripting this video, and time again they've mentioned, oh yeah, I really used to like the Yogscast, and one video came up in both conversations I had about it, which I went out and watched, and I was told it was basically, it got better the more you had engaged with the channel at that time, but was still funny if you hadn't seen any content from them. Well, basically, they just make a black hole, and shenanigans ensue. I think the fact that that's still remembered 10 years on as just something good enough to pass on to me who didn't even watch them to begin with, goes to show that there is quality in videos that aren't necessarily super overproduced. That one mostly is just switching of perspectives, and that's still a lot more engaging than a video that's over-edited and designed to keep me engaged. It was just fun. And I think the current climate, I've seen people reminiscing on older content like that, and getting more dissatisfied with the current state of content. I think eventually we're going to see the trend come full circle, where it is the trend to just make Minecraft content at that global level. I think all it takes is one person to see good success with a series like that, for then that to become the trend. Once you show people that that is the alternative and it can still be done well in the current year despite being arguably more basic than the over-optimized content that's current, I think we'll see a shift, and with any luck, hopefully it leads to some sort of return to personality to YouTube as well. Well, you know, I can dream. And even in despite of that, I know there will be good Minecraft content out there, but equally it's not going to be easy to find. The state of YouTube in its current form will promote the highest performing content because that's what works and what everyone else has quote-unquote enjoyed already. But if you dig enough, I reckon you'll be able to find a piece of content that makes you feel something. Taking the time to look for that, and voting with your views on the content you want to see by yourself will make a change. Even if it's just you, it means you'll get shown the content you can walk away from and feel sullen, feel emotions and opinionated about, and even remember and differentiate the creators that are making it. I've held the opinion that you're able to tell when someone's heart is in what they're making for a while now, and that rings true for all of YouTube. There's a reason I'm able to get invested into whatever Nick Robinson uploads, regardless of if I'm familiar with the subject he's covering or not. And it doesn't have subtitles that are obscene in both size and speed, or a pace that you'll need a kilogram of G Fuel to keep up with. It's engaging in its own way that still allows each beat time to breathe, and has plenty of moments to show the soul behind the video. I've consistently loved CND's set of series where he camps outside the Nintendo New York store so he can be the first in line for their major releases. I went back and watched a few of the original series, and despite having been 6 years, I still found those videos charming to the point I ended up watching more than just the one episode I said I would. But would those videos be the same if there was a change in creative direction? If more people were brought on to help make and direct them? Or if they sold what they were making to a bigger company that wanted to ensure it was profitable for them? Hang on a second, that sounds awfully familiar. This isn't some sort of surprise revelation, it's happened in YouTube before. It's happened in music, film, and TV many times before, and every time, there's a snapback. A point where eventually the viewers and listeners at home realised they could vote with their money and attention to protest the stagnant landscape in any of those mediums. Sometimes it's gradual, and sometimes it's an unexpected snap that can come out of nowhere. I think Disney is the best example I can give. Among the oversaturation of Marvel and live-action remakes where only the Aladdin one was good, they've seen a sharp decrease in viewership, especially on Disney+. Things got saturated and felt like they were stagnating, and they've been feeling that impact gradually reflected in their viewing and subscription figures. And then you have those snap moments where something comes out and it's new, it's fresh, it's different to what people have seen. And it's not a question of when you're speaking to someone, oh, have you, or do you think you're going to see this thing? It basically becomes a, oh, have you seen this yet? Or what episode are you up to? The expectation isn't if you are gonna watch it possibly, it is, have you watched it yet? It's like Squid Games and Stranger Things. Everybody was talking about those when they came out, and like, why was it? It was because, yeah, they were good. They were well produced and put together, but they were something different, something new. And in a landscape where stuff kind of tends to stagnate, you have those snap moments where, yeah, people maybe get complacent and the studios making the stuff get complacent, it just kind of flattens out. But it means that when you have something like those that stands out and is still really good, that there's going to be a jump in people to go, oh my god, that is different, you know? I think whether people realise it or not, when a media landscape starts to stagnate, even if they don't know it, they start to get bored. And when new and exciting stuff comes out that presents something new and interesting and is done well, I think people are naturally drawn to it because it's something different. And even if they don't clock it entirely, I think the fact that different offerings that do something divisive and stand out do so well is because subconsciously or not, that's what people are kind of wanting to look for. And yes, this is still a video talking about Minecraft, but that happens in all sorts of genres. And I think my favourite one, thankfully, is my favourite band of all time, Go Me. So yes, while we are still definitely talking about a game made by Mojang in 2011, how many of you have seen the hit 2002 reality TV talent show Pop Stars The Rivals? I want to say, I told you it'd be a tangent. See, the general synopsis is that this show was going to form a boy band and a girl band that would then battle it out for the Christmas #1 of 2002. And the general expectation, I think, within talent shows then and even now, was that, yeah, they'll have some short-term fame, maybe their album and a few of their singles will do well, but generally, they were formed on reality TV. They're not going to push the boundaries, they're not going to do anything to particularly make them stand out, they're only going to be big as long as they're on television getting that exposure. Now that expectation for both of these groups to fail became 50% true, because after losing the race to Christmas #1, you don't really hear much about One True Voice anymore, and didn't in about a year after they were formed either. Girls Aloud, however, went straight to #1, sat there for 4 weeks, because the song they produced wasn't exactly what you'd expect to hear from a girl band, especially in the 2000s. It was like drum and bass, this song was different, and you know what? I'd go ahead and play it in the background if it didn't get this video copyright claimed.
That was something else. It was this snap moment where it was
it was different. The expectation that they were going to fail and just produce some kind of generic thing was smashed out of the gate and then continued to be smashed time after time after time again, to the point where they are like the exception, not the rule, that they were able to maintain relevance all the way through until the end of the decade. Like, they seriously became one of the UK's best-selling pop acts ever, and that wasn't just because of their debut single doing well. It was because their career was continually hit after hit of different sounding songs that pushed the boundaries of what people would expect from the medium. Seriously, if you show someone with a basic understanding of music theory, the more extensive the better, and you play their hit song Biology for them, they will have a stroke and die. That said, you could say UK music, despite that kind of renaissance in the 2000s and whatnot, is in a bit of a lull once again. But that doesn't mean that it can't get out of it. As established, when stuff's in a lull, that gives the best possible chance for something new and exciting, doing something different, to completely succeed. Because whether people are only passively or actively tired of that climate, to be presented with a choice that is something different than what all the board executives know they're going to do and sell well and whatnot, being presented with that sort of option in that climate is unironically the best start those projects can have. Because when people are sick of the current status quo, they are more than happy to jump on the alternative if it means they can stick it to a few very fucking rich billionaires and their board of directors.
I think a stagnation in Minecraft content's creativity, arguably the reason most people know about the game to begin with, is the real culprit as to why the game itself doesn't feel exciting as it once did. There are factors, of course there are issues that take issue with the game's updates, but I think they get exacerbated when most of the content I see and watch about the game stagnates. Because if the thing arguably responsible for keeping the game in the spotlight as it has been starts to feel boring and uninteresting, I think that passively impacts opinion on the game itself as well. Just like any stagnation in media, it'll eventually correct itself and feel fresh again when audiences get sick of it and seek out something new. So while it may all seem a little down for Minecraft right now, with a moderate amount of videos I found covering a similar topic when researching this section, combined with the sentiment in the comments and the view counts on them, I think we're closer to seeing another shake-up within the content sphere than we initially realise. They were just videos talking about Minecraft, but the Mr. Beastification of YouTube has been the topic of debate for a few months already too. And I think with each day that passes and the more people and momentum that sentiment begins to snowball, I think the market of complacency and optimization is going to find its revenue taking a downturn. And I've got to say, having avoided most Minecraft content online while making this video these last few weeks, I've been passively correcting my prior mostly negative opinion towards the game. This was just a me thing, but trying my hardest to avoid any and all content surrounding the game and just playing without engaging in any of that, it had so much more of an impact than I thought it would have. There was no passing negative sentiment to acknowledge on Twitter after I muted the word. I just had my own play sessions to inform my decision. And it was fun. The game itself wasn't bland, I could always do something to make sure that wasn't the case. I enjoyed setting small goals for each session, or just going on to mess around with my friends. Not on stuff I'd seen online, but just stuff I remembered as being fun. It may vary from person to person, but I'd had no idea how much my opinion of the game had been swayed by content online without even realising it. I mean, this video you're watching right now started because I was feeling dissatisfied with the game, but weirdly enough, this video is now the reason I have a greater respect for the game than I presumably have had at least in the best half decade. There's a lot more nuance to this topic is what I've learned while writing this, and I think it's more complex than simply calling the game bad or Mojang lazy. So yeah, go make that surf with your friends and see how much you enjoy it once the ball gets rolling and let me know. Did it change your feelings on the game, and what about those of you that went for single player instead? I don't think the game is as stale as the internet might have you believe, but as always let me know if you agree or disagree with that down in the comments down below. And with all that said, and all that aside, seriously, start working on that Minecraft server. Me and you both know you're itching to do that, yeah? But that's everything for now. So yeah, until next time, all that said and all that aside, thanks for watching guys, my name's Panoramic and peace out.